right, and we're on. Welcome everyone back. This is another episode of the Go-to-Market Kickback, the #1 go-to-market interview, leadership, and strategy podcast in the world. And that's a fact, Dominic, if I didn't make that known before. Very niche category, but we are leading it and dominating it. We're joined by a wonderful guest here today, Mr. Dominick Delfino. You've got too many accolades to list here. I'll try my best here, Dominic, but you've had one of the most successful sales leadership careers across the technology, across the infrastructure, enterprise software, cybersecurity space that I've yet to see in my decade of recruiting for the best sales leaders in the ecosystem, right? That you've done so well within. Held CRO roles at Google, cybersecurity, Nutanix, Pure Storage, VMware. Big career at Cisco a little bit earlier on, 25 years in sales, systems engineering, leading go-to-market teams. Now you're spending your time advising, investing, serving on boards of other high-velocity startups and helping incubate companies in the cyber and enterprise software ecosystem. And you've got some of the neatest ideas that we talked about a little bit in our pre-show chat around what makes a truly scalable sales leader, which I think comes from probably, I'll let you tell me, your diversity of experience across some of the most successful organizations in the entire world, but being up and down the ladder throughout your career. And very, very, very few people make it from seller to CRO of Google, right? And I imagine there's some tips and tricks that you hopefully are willing to share that got you there along the way. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, Joey, great to be here with you. So glad to be here on the World Champion of Go-to-Market podcast. So, it's been, technology is obviously a super exciting place to have a career in. And the only constant in that industry is change, right? So, your customers are constantly changing, your competitors are constantly changing. So, you've got to be able to adapt and pivot quickly and act very strongly in what is a probably the most dynamic market in the world today. So I was very, very lucky to work under some incredible leaders throughout my career from start to finish. And you kind of learn what to do, how to do it, what not to do. And, you pick up a lot of pieces along the way that just come with experience over time.
Can you give me the 60-second career arc? Because you came from an interesting path, more as a technologist as opposed to starting directly in sales out of school or whatever it was.
Yeah, so I actually started my career in corporate IT, or I think many people who wind up in pre-sales engineering, systems engineering, whatever you want to call it, at some point started their career actually working for an enterprise in their IT organization, right? So I started my career as a network analyst and as a SCO Unix administrator at Rite Aid drugstores. Was at the time probably the largest x86 Unix shop in the world, right? So you learned an immense amount very, very quickly. You worked your tail off, right? They paid you nothing and worked you to the bone. But it was a great, sort of what I would call an entry-level technology job. And, went on from there went to work for a small systems integrator based in New York. Predominantly their clients were large financial services customers in New York City, some universities, some cable companies, things of that nature, doing post-sales engineering, right? Doing implementation of technologies for these companies, whether they be migrations, back then from Token Ring and 10base 2 to 10base T, or CC Mail to Exchange, or NetWare to Windows NT, and things of that nature. And what I quickly figured out, Joey, was that I loved working with clients. After a while, I kind of didn't love troubleshooting bugs, right? So you'd get this infrastructure set up, and then now you're sitting on the phone with Microsoft, and it's like, well, you need hotfix A and service pack B, and that's why this isn't working. And so while infrastructure design and architecture and implementation was something that I enjoyed very, very much, there was the post-implementation troubleshooting and stuff that was very tedious and time-consuming and not something I really enjoyed. So I had moved to a pre-sales engineering role. Our company was acquired by Dimension Data, big global conglomerate, initially out of South Africa, now owned by NTT out of Japan. And, I stayed for probably about a year, and we were very big Cisco partners. We had migrated from 3Com partners at the time to Cisco partners. And when I decided I was going to leave, the Cisco guys were like, hey, come work for us, right? We love you. You'll do great here. Started there as a pre-sales engineer, covering global financial accounts, all the big brand names on Wall Street. And at that point, Cisco had decided they were going to do this concept called a spin-in, right? We're going to fund this startup, push it out, and when it gets to beta, we're going to roll it back in. And, Dominick, we know you have a systems background. We'd love for you to lead this team of pre-sales engineers who are building our storage networking platform, right? And I had kind of been hesitant previously about changing my role, predominantly because I did not want to give up my technological skill set that I had worked so hard to build. But this was very interesting to me. I was going to be partnered with a great sales leader, and I started there. I had 4 engineers working for me covering the Eastern United States. Our first quarter's quota was $14 million in bookings. Being the serial overachiever that I am, Joey, we did 14.1.
I love to hear it.
Yeah, and we built that business from 0 to $8 billion a year over the 12-year period that I was in that role. And, I went from manager to senior manager to director to senior director to vice president. I think I had 1,700 engineers working for me globally at about 2014 when I decided I was going to leave Cisco. And I think, this was kind of and I do think job changes is an important part of this, right? That we need to talk about today, right? Too many people are thinking about the next opportunity, and they're not thinking about what the next opportunity sets them up for 2 or 3 opportunities down the road. And I had been offered many different roles, and within the company and in other companies. And I think timing is everything. At that point, I had been at Cisco for 14 years. I was 40 years old. I woke up one day and said, wow, am I going to spend the rest of my career here? Or can I prove to myself that I can have this kind of success in a new company with a different leadership team, with, a different product portfolio? And this is about the time software-defined networking and software-defined security was becoming a thing. Yeah. And, had managed to connect with the folks at VMware, with Carl Eschenbach and Martin Casado, who had founded Nicira, the SDN software-defined security startup that they had acquired. And they said, hey, come over here and help us build out our systems engineering organization. And I did that for the first year. We were having tremendous success, massive growth. And Martin came to me at the end of the year and said, hey, we want you to run the sales organization as well as the SC organization next year globally. And I think what had led him to that conclusion was not necessarily specifically the success of the systems engineering team or our growth. It was the things that I was doing at the time that set us up for longer term growth, right? And it was, how are we training and enabling our teams, right? The product's evolving, constantly. We have quarterly releases, we have new features, new technologies, new capabilities. We went from this ragtag group of small sales team, 8-10 people, to 50 people now, and you start to need some more organization, some more process, some regular training and development. You need to be able to forecast your business and analyze pipeline and look at your opportunities and share your success stories and understand what sales plays are working, what sales plays are not working, what are the competition doing. And I had been doing all of that groundwork in the first year to really make sure that the capabilities that we delivered in terms of the growth we had already delivered could continue for the next few years. And we grew that business from 0 to $4 billion in 4 years, right? And it was probably in that 4-year period, something on the order of 50% of the company's total growth was just coming from that software-defined data center component of the product portfolio.
Wow.
So at that point, I've kind of led specialist organizations and direct organizations at both Cisco and VMware. And, things don't become easier over time. It's not that they're not challenging, but, at some point it does become the same challenge over and over again, right? And that's where you got to be really careful, because you can start to get lackadaisical when you think that you have a system that's working, and you sort of take your eye off the ball a little bit. And my boss at the time had, the leader of the Americas for VMware had left, and my boss at the time offered me the opportunity to do that job. And, now you're going from running a 1,600 person organization and, sort of $4 billion a year in revenue to a 4,000 person organization and $6 billion a year in revenue and 50% of the company's total growth. So your perspective has to change. And I think at that point, Joey, when you're running an organization of that scale in terms of the number of people, the revenue, the different elements of the organization, one of the things that Maurizio Carli had told me at the time, who was the CRO of the company, was, Dom, you have to be ruthless at prioritization. And I think that was one of the key things for me was I can't get mired down in tactical things unless I absolutely have to, because it's an emergency, if I'm going to set this business up for success for the next 3 to 5 years. So I'll stop there, Joey, because I've said a lot, and I just want to give you the opportunity to have some dialogue around there.
There's this article I reference all the time when I'm consulting the startups, the board members, and the equity sponsors that I work with as executive search clients when they're looking to hire a sales leader, right? And it's from Jason Limpkin of SaaStr, big media events investment organization. He published this article years ago about the 48 different types of sales leaders, but there's 4 main archetypes, right? And the number one sort of variable, I think, that can consistently produce a correct type of sales leader for your stage of growth is, have they done it at a similar investment and revenue range that you're looking to grow through today? And he puts it in 4 buckets. The 0 to 1 guy who's the evangelist, activating the friends and family networks and, going out there and taking something that is new to the world, right? And making something successful for it, right? And there's the 1 to 10 guy who is I'm looking at it so I don't misquote this, the Mr. Make It Repeatable, right? That puts in some actual first time scalable processes, right? That can be rinsed, repeats, and scaled with other sales talent underneath them. Then there's the go big person that takes you 10 to 40, $50 million. And then there's the Mr. Dashboards, the analytical leader, right? That then moves you to the 100 million, the $1 billion range following that, and all foreseeing growth. And the biggest challenge, right, that I think a lot of, at least the startups that I worked with, is finding someone that can make those transitions into those different archetypes. And 90% of them can't do it, right? They basically hire the sales leader to go 0 to 1 with the knowledge that as soon as they get there, they're going to need to probably bring in someone different or upskill their organization with a CRO or something on top of that VP of sales. My question to you is, you've done every stage of that successfully. Like, is it something that you've learned along the way? Is it something that is a mental skill, right? Where you can just visualize the organization and adjust your priorities accordingly? Or tell me how in your words have you made those different steps happen so successfully, and not even just one time? You've got a consistent pattern of this, right? At least between Cisco and VMware that you just described, going from 0 to billions of dollars of revenue in each of them and the product categories you led. What was the secret sauce there that led you to be the leader in all those different stages where no one else can?
I think it's a really great question, Joey. And I think it's maybe the answer is not what you would expect. Okay. You can't have a playbook. that you just carry around with you and you just run the same plays over and over again. I did this at Cisco, so it should work with VMware. And I did this at VMware, should work at Google. It doesn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Every company is different. Every product portfolio is different. So every operating model is different. And I just think it's you got to be willing to stick your neck out there. Okay. So when you go from a salesperson to a sales manager or a systems engineer to a systems engineering manager, you sort of get away with initially leveraging this player coach role, which maybe that's the 0 to 1 at the startup you're talking about, right? And chances are that if you're going from a salesperson to a sales manager or an SC to an SC manager, you were pretty good at what you did, and maybe even really good at what you did. And I think for me, when I first went from an individual contributor to a manager, and I was kind of knew I was going to give up that technical skill set, I said, well, I think what would excite me the most would be building a team of great sales engineers, right? Or great team of great sellers. And that's why I want to be a sales leader or an SE leader. And you start to realize as you assess your team, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, where their gaps are, and you're coaching them and you're guiding them, and maybe you're even hand-holding them and helping them do their job initially. But you start to realize that that's not scalable. When you go from 4 people to 6 people to 8 people to 10 people to 12 people, and they're geographically dispersed throughout the country, and you're not sitting in an office with them around your cubes, and you start to realize, okay, I've got this thing off the ground, but now I need to change, and I need to go from player coach to, professional sales manager, right? And I need to start thinking about other things. What does my pipeline look like, current quarter +2, right? Am I weak in Q2 or Q3? Why? Am I running the sales plays? Am I leveraging my partner community correctly? Are my marketing campaigns being followed up on? So on and so forth. And then you sort of go from, professional sales manager to professional sales manager with more scale, right? And you start to realize now there's people management that's more important, right, than sales opportunities and meetings and things of that nature, right? How am I developing my people? How am I developing my leaders so that I don't have to step in and do their job for them, right? How am I teaching them how to hold people accountable? How am I teaching them about what data sets they need to have to manage the business? Because I think that's something you talked about when you get to the scale person is, you need to have a ton of data, and you need to leverage that data to understand what levers you have to push and pull as a sales leader to change the dynamics of the business, okay? And the sales team is the most measurable team out of every organization, in every company. Every 90 days, I can measure you 90 different ways. We can produce metrics about, attainment versus plan, growth, right? How do we do in the Americas? How do we do in EMEA? How do we do in APJ? How do we do in specific vertical markets? How many of my salespeople made plan last quarter? How many of them finished between 0 and 25%, 25 and 50, 50 and 75, 75 and 100, over 100, right? Why are my salespeople who are not making plan, right? Am I goaling people fair way? Do I have the right compensation plans? So there's all these, you have a mass amount of metrics you can produce every 90 days. I don't know how you do that if you're the chief HR officer for HR, or if you're general counsel for the legal department. Arguably, engineering could do it, but they don't like to. They're like, no, don't measure us. We just build a good product, right? So, you've got to realize that, you can't just be super sales guy when you become, or super sales gal when you become a sales leader, right? You can for a period of time, but you only get so many hours in the week, right? So you can't run around on every sales call and meet with every customer and every partner and help close every deal. So if you're a great salesperson, you think about, well, how do I build a team of great salespeople so I don't have to go do that? And I could start to think about bigger picture, longer term, more strategic initiatives. Yeah. Okay. And it's much easier to do when things are going well, to not be tactically focused and mired down in the deals and be a little more strategic and long-term focused. It's much harder to do when the business isn't doing well, right? Because you've got to get to that point where you shore things up before you can move on to the bigger picture, more strategic things.
What's the driving motivator throughout that because a lot of people are financially motivated in sales. Shocker, right? And
Yeah.
they make this transition to sales leader, and they realize that they have less control because it's not just their pipeline, their deal flow, their win close rate, and their quota, right? And I see a very common outcome is those sales leaders, at least in startup land where they can be, right? They've got 10, 15 or less salespeople in their organization. They get hands-on on every single deal because they think that they're best to close it, right? And it's aligned to their compensation and their structure and whatever, right? Are there motivators outside of that you see, say quarter to quarter, year to year, right? Are you driven by the success of the company? Are you truly motivated by just seeing great people? I just feel a lot of people say that. I want my teams to grow. I want to move into leadership. I'm motivated by that, but they don't genuinely mean it. They think it's a path to, okay, long-term, there's a bigger financial payout for myself, right? But clearly you've gotten past that through the success you've had and the long arcs that it's gone through, that I don't think that's the case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think when you become a leader, you need to check your ego at the door, because it's no longer about you, right? It's about your team. You either win as a team or you lose as a team. You are not successful as a leader if your people underneath you are not successful, right? So like, I want them to win. I'm rooting for them to win. I'm trying to help them win because I don't win unless they win. I think second thing for me, I would say, a lot of people say, what drives you, power or money, right? And I think for me, it was neither. It was just success. Okay. Yeah. And it was not only the success, but also the fear of not being successful. Yeah. Okay. And I think there is nothing worse than having to walk into an E-staff meeting or a board meeting and saying, we didn't meet expectations this quarter. Right. Yeah. That's like, I feel like I've let the people who have entrusted me to do this job down. Okay. And I think if you just focus on being successful, you'll get power and you'll get money. Right. I'm sure you see it. You have the serial startup entrepreneur sales leader who's taken X companies from 0 to Y, and they've had successful exits, whether they be IPOs or acquisitions, and they're super coveted in the market, right? Like you want that guy for your next startup or that gal for your next startup. So I think for me, it's like, if you're really good at what you do, people will recognize it and they will come tap you on the shoulder and ask you to do more for them or for the business. And sometimes that will just be you doing more. And sometimes that will be you doing more, and maybe you'll get a better title and the appropriate remuneration that comes with that. Sometimes it'll just be more work. So I think you just focus on that, right? It's not about power. And you see, particularly in these large corporations, the internal politics are sometimes out of control. You'll see people trying to take over other teams and get more headcount because more headcount is more power. And, maybe if I have enough headcount, that'll qualify me to get to the next title change, so on and so forth. But it's just win. Yeah. Be great at what you're doing every single day. That's all you need to do. Yeah. It's really not that complicated. Sales is, if we put 5,000 salespeople in a room and we ask them to raise your hand, if you have a college degree from an accredited university in sales, how many people are going to raise their hands? Right? If you did, you probably wasted a lot of money and time and effort and energy, maybe your parents' money. But good salespersonship is just about doing all the basics correctly all of the time. Yeah. Right. Are you, and it's also about hiring the unteachables. I can teach you SecOps. I can teach you CNAP. I can teach you sales plays. I can teach you ROI. I can teach you TCO. I can't teach you how to good work ethic if you're lazy. Yeah. I can't teach you how to be motivated if you're depressed, right? I can't teach you how to be driven, a self-starter, right? So I think, to me, you got to look for those core competencies in these teams that you're building to say, this person's ambitious, they're self-starter, they're driven, they're motivated, They have a great work ethic. They have great values and ethics and morals as well. I'm not worried about sending them out to a customer and they're going to do something, offensive in a meeting. And then really, investing in a proper training and enablement and curriculum to teach them the pieces they don't have, right?
Yeah.
I think also part of this is knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses are, okay? And I think, it's human nature for us to rely on our strengths and ignore our weaknesses. We all like doing what we're good at doing. Nobody likes doing the things we're not good at doing, but augment yourself. And this is what we talk about diversity and the makeup of a team. Obviously diversity is important for a variety of different reasons, but you're really looking for is thought and skill diversity, right?
Yeah.
And, that may come from gender, that may come from, racial orientation, it may come from different experiences, background, but like, I know for me to be a successful CRO, I need a strong sales operations leader, right? I need I know what data I need. I know what I want to see. I know how I want to manage the business. I know what my business process management strategy is. So I need somebody to go and do all that stuff, right? Who I'm on the same wavelength with, who's really good at, setting up all the systems and process and tooling to make our lives really, really easy and to give us the data that we need to run the business.
Let me double tap on the talent acquisition vector here. So obviously it's very relevant to what we do. Our ethos here at Lunar Executive Search, right? It's all go-to-market search for the fastest growing technology companies in the world. And I resonate completely with what you said. Sales organizations are the most measurable facet of any organization, top to bottom by 100-fold, right? If you want it to be. But back to startup land, so many people, I think, are victim to hiring off of gut feel and vibes, right? And even in the sales world, particularly for founders and CEOs that are of technical nature, hiring a CRO or VP of sales for the first or second time, they don't put as much weight as I think they need to into the analytics and the black and white, right, of that person's background. Not to neglect the gut feeling and the vibes and the soft skills, right, but to compound the two to have a much better result at the end of it, So what we do at Lunar is we benchmark across the industry. We source all sorts of different data aggregations to find out what variables make the best salespeople the most successful, right? Whether that's stage-specific experience with certain selling motions, selling a certain buyer persona, selling certain ACV sizes, selling to certain scales of enterprises, right? There's 15 or 20 different variables that we'll look at, right? Depending on the nature of the company that we're consulting with, right? But my question is, how have you, as you clearly have done it very successfully, compounded those two things, the analytical, the black and white nature of the side of hiring sales talent, right? While still getting all of the intangibles of the grittiness and the hard work and the energy that I think is much harder to uncover, but is the tendency where people lean to, right? Because they don't know to look for the analytical, right, or the data-driven assessment of those types of talent.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Joey. I think two things, right? So gut feeling should be a very small part of why you hire somebody. We all use that, right? Like, okay, I got good vibes from Joey, or I don't have good vibes from Joey, okay? Why, right? But I think if you look at the CEOs, it's particularly in that company category, the startups, or the earlier stage companies, the bulk of their backgrounds are in what?
Technology.
Product, right?
Product.
So they have no practical go-to-market experience themselves. So I think this is where that, knowing what you're not good at is important, right? Like, I'm not good at this, so I'm going to rely on a guy like Joey to help or advise me, right? Or maybe a previous sales leader I work with to kind of help come in and talk to me about, what individuals. You really got to be looking at people's track record. Do you have a track record of success or not? Okay, yep. And why? And by the way, nobody's track record is flawless, right? And if it is, you haven't had challenging enough roles. but I think it's really important that, and I you deal with this in technology a lot. The bulk of the leaders, particularly in early stage companies, are founders, and they typically are engineering product people. They don't have that understanding of go to market. So understanding that that's a weakness for me. I don't really know. I've never run a sales organization. I've got to go hire a sales leader. I need to ask for help here. Okay,
Yeah.
That's problem one. And I'll give you a perfect example, right? When I worked for Cisco, John Chambers was the CEO, incredible leader. Can't say enough things about how he ran the business, the company, the culture, how he treated people. But John Chambers came from a go-to-market background, right? Didn't come from a product background, which is pretty rare at tech companies. When at VMware, Pat Gelsinger was the CEO, who was very much a technologist, right? 25-year CTO of Intel, EMC. But I think what was most impressive to Pat about me in working with him quite closely was he knew to rely on Carl Eschenbach and Sanjay Poonen and Maurizio Curley for the go-to-market things, right? So, and it was like, your ability to listen is important sometimes, even when you're the CEO, because you don't have all the answers. And I've worked with the CEOs who are more product oriented, who think they know everything. And, they're very wrong in many cases, right? And, sometimes they don't want to hear it. And that's not a good recipe for long-term success. And you'll see some companies, and I can think of a few to come to mind, right? Big companies, technology companies, public companies, they have a new CRO every year. Why is that? Right? Are you really bad at hiring? Do you keep hiring terrible people who don't know what they're doing? Or is there something else in the business that's not functioning where this leader is not empowered to make the decisions that they need to make in order to run the business in the way it needs to be run for the company to be successful? So yeah. I think, gut alone is probably not a good thing. You need to have a really good process, first of all, right? You need to check references. I can't tell you how many people get hired without checking references. And those references should be 360. They should be people who worked for that individual, people who that individual worked for, peers of that individual, cross-functionally. As a sales leader, I got to have a great relationship with the product team. I would attribute most of our success in Google Cloud cybersecurity business to not only the relationship between me and Sunil Patti, who was the GM in the BU, the GM of the business unit running product management and engineering, but my team's relationship with his team.
Yeah.
So, because that's where you start to create that closed loop process from the customer through the sales and systems and engineering organizations back through product management and into engineering as well, to ensure that, they clearly bought our technology because they think it's going to add value to their environment. How do we make sure that we continue to add value, right? And find new use cases. Well, this customer figured out how they could use our product this way, and they're getting that benefit from it. Well, now I'm going to go evangelize that to all my other customers or prospects as well. So I think it's track record's important, references are important, cultural fit is very important, right? Like, is this somebody I could work with day in and day out? Right? Is this somebody I can have a lively, contested debate with? And we can come to a conclusion. And even when that conclusion is that we don't agree, we can still move on and work together and this concept of disagree, but still commit. Okay, ultimately, yeah. CEO, I've told you what my opinion is. You told me what your opinion is. We've discussed the pros and cons of each. We don't agree. At the end of the day, you do get to make the decision. You're the boss, okay? So if you want me to do that, I'm going to go and do that. And then am I going to go and do it begrudgingly, or am I going to go and do it wholeheartedly, right? Yeah. So that importance of all of those elements of track record, fit, finish, understanding of the industry, the market, the segment, the product, the technology, the customers, the partners, all of those things combined are the systems, the tools, the processes, the training, the enablement. I can tell you, if I went back to Cisco and I surveyed the sales and SE forces and VMware and Google, everyone would tell you, what's the worst part of your job? Every single one of those people at all of those companies would tell you, systems, processes, and tools. It's too hard to get a quote out the door. It's too hard to get, contract terms of service agreed to. It's too hard to transact, right? The quote to crash process is terrible, particularly in these bigger companies where it's been an amalgamation of acquisitions that have never been properly integrated. And you've got all these legacy systems sitting around as well. It is the bane of my existence for the last 30 years. And we fixed a lot of it, right? But some companies, you think you could just buy this company? Okay, did you put in the budget? You've got this big sales force. You want them to sell that new product from that company you bought. You're buying this company, you're spending 300 million, 500 million, 5 billion, 10 billion, 30 billion. What's the plan to train and enable the people? That's going to cost money. We need to develop a curriculum. We develop content. We need to have maybe testing apparatuses. Are we doing this training virtual? Are we flying people in? Are we doing it globally? Are we doing it regionally? How much is that going to cost? Oh, $2 million. Dominic, as a sales leader, you don't have this huge discretionary budget. The bulk of your budget is in people and headcount and salaries and commissions, right? It's not like I have this slush fund of $2 million just sitting around waiting for us to buy a company. Oh, they have a separate Salesforce instance. Okay, we're going to put in a Salesforce connector between their Salesforce instance and our instance so we can share opportunities back and forth. That's going to cost money. Who's going to do that, right? So, you start to think about, hey, engineering's building a new product. What's the new product introduction plan? Are my people getting trained before we launch it at the RSA conference, right? Do they understand it? When a customer comes up to them and says, hey, Joey, I heard about your great new product, and you're sitting there like, I don't know anything about this because they didn't tell me they were launching a new product today. You look like idiots, right? So, the bigger you become, the more scalable you come, you have to start to think about these other elements of the business because they could be a huge obstacle to your success.
Let me ask you one more question, and we'll leave it off at that, Dominic. Flip the script on that. You've clearly got a very acute ability to pick winners in the organizations that you've joined, right? And I am guessing that is not happenstance by any means. If you were a sales leader looking for a new leader or new opportunity today, what sort of things are you looking for, right? And the leader, in the product, in the market, the stuff that you're indexing for and assessing for that make you feel as comfortable as you can, right? That's never a sure thing, that is the appropriate opportunity that you should join, and you're going to have as much success as you can if you put in your end of the deal.
Yeah, I think you got to look at a variety of things, Joey. One is product market fit, right? Like, is this product going to be relevant in the market? Who's the competition? What are they doing? Why are they doing that? Why are we different? How are we adding value? What are the benefits that my customers are going to get? I think as a salesperson, you're not going to be successful selling a mediocre product. I don't care how good of a salesperson you are. If you don't have great product to go to market on the back of, you might have limited success, but you're not going to have long-lasting success, right? So, and is it very motivating to sell something that you don't even believe in yourself? Right. So I've got to believe in it. I got to believe that this is true innovation that addresses business and technology problems that are going to make an impact on that customer who acquires it. That's number one. Number two, people are probably more important to me now than ever, right? Who are the people that are around this table? Do I like these people? Am I going to want to work with these people 60, 70, 80, 100 hours a week for the next X number of years, right? Are we going to get along? Is there an opportunity to build on that professional relationship into a personal relationship, right? You work with good people, you do good work together, you start to like those people, you wind up becoming friends with them, right? If you can't become friends with them, are those people you want to spend 60, 70, 80, 100 hours a week with, right? Are their expectations realistic?
That's a big one.
That's a very big one. A very big one. We want to do 10 million in our first year. Yeah, I'd like a garage full of Ferrari, but that's not happening either. So, are their expectations realistic? Is the input there in order to get the output that is desired? And I think that would probably be the thing that holds me back the most. Okay, is I don't think some leaders have an understanding of what the state of the market is, what the state of their company is, and how those two apply together and to get the desired outcome that they want. Right? Yeah, we want to grow as fast as possible. Yeah, everybody does. You want to grow 20%, you want to grow 40%, you want to grow 80% year over year, you want to grow 100% year over year. Okay. Are you willing to invest in what you need to invest and do what you need to do, from a technology product perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a sales organization perspective, from a competitive perspective, from a, it can't take me 3 weeks to get a quote out the door, right? I should be able to do a quote for a customer in 15 minutes, cradle to grave, right?
Yep.
So I think that's for me, it's more fit from a product market perspective, from a team perspective, from a culture perspective. And then, do I feel like if Joey's hiring me, I can meet his expectations with what he's giving me to work with, right? And if I can't, can I get Joey to realign his expectations based on an educated discussion that we've had? Or is this maybe not an opportunity for me?
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Joey?
Absolutely. This is invaluable advice, Dominic. Thank you so much for sitting down, sharing all of this, giving this detail. I think this is going to help a lot of people. And these are some of the most common concerns that I hear day in and day out, both from sales leaders and from hiring leaders, right? That are trying to matchmake, right? To create successful companies in that endeavor together. So you've had one of the most successful track records that I've seen again. And thank you for giving us a little bit of a taste here on what it means to be Dominick Delfino, the great sales leader that he is. Where can the people find you? What can they find you for? Anything else you want to add in here?
Yeah, so you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I don't really use Twitter very much, so you probably won't find anything relevant there, but you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. And obviously, we've got Singular.ai up and running now. I just invested in and advising the CEO and joined the board of another stealth startup who will be coming out of stealth mode in the next few months. And, I'm predominantly focused on cybersecurity companies, particularly cybersecurity companies, and how they're using AI to take on the next generation of threats. If not there, you can find me on the golf course producing some pretty lousy golf some days.
I love to hear it. Well, thank you again. Thank you everyone for tuning in for another episode of the Go-to-Market Kickback, and we'll be back again soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Joey.